May the words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be now and always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. In this mixed up time, where time moves so strangely, both far too fast and far too slowly, I find that I am grateful for the rhythms of the church year. I find that in the movement of that cycle through the birth and life and death and resurrection and teaching of Jesus of Nazareth, in the changing of the banners and the colors and the decor of the church, I find an anchor, or at least something to hold on to, a rhythm that carries on despite the temporary conditions of this world. Invitations into the hope of Advent and the joy of Christmas and the turning towards light of Epiphany, and then the inward turn into Lenten self-examination, the darkness of Holy Week, and then the wonder of Easter, where even death gives way to the power of God's love for God's people. It's been 43 days since then. Just if you've had trouble keeping track of time, it's been 43 days. And the rhythm of the year brings us to the Feast of the Ascension, the bookend to the story of Christmas, the flesh-made Word. And for the disciples, the end of the time that they had with Jesus among them to help them make sense of what had happened in the whole time that they had known him, but especially to make sense of what had happened at Easter, where even death gave way to the power of God's love for God's people. 40 days is not a long time. I know it feels like it every time the stay-at-home order gets extended, but 40 days is not a long time. Not a long time for your world to be shaken to its roots and then turned upside down and then flipped inside out. Since Easter, for all of these 40 days, the lectionary has offered to us stories about discipleship. Stories in which the disciples are figuring out what it means for them to be followers of Jesus, both with him and in the Gospels and without him in the Acts of the Apostles. And so we, who now call ourselves disciples of Jesus, try to imagine ourselves in their midst. These men and women who have gathered around Jesus of Nazareth because there is something about him that has drawn them in and that will not let them go. Tomorrow, the first thing that I will listen to as part of the Festival of Homiletics is the opening worship led by Michael Curry. I forget what the American primate is, head of the Episcopal Church in the United States. And so much of what I say now is indebted to the last time I heard him preach, which was at Ascension a few years ago. But what is at the heart of what Jesus has done in his time with his disciples, in his teaching, in his living, in his death, in his resurrection, and now in his ascension, is about love. He has talked about love and he loved them, and he has talked about love and he freed them, and he talked about love and he healed them, and he talked about love and he has been fearless, and he has talked about love and he has given them hope. And he does all of this among a people who live under Roman occupation, who live as subjects of Caesar, a man who declares himself to be a god and demands that his comfort and his power be sustained no matter what else must be sacrificed to make it so. And in that time and in that place, so deeply in need of transformation, of turning upside down and inside out, Jesus appears among them and says, love can do that. Love does that. Love is doing that. What a declaration. And the empire kills him for it. Was that really only 44 days ago? And love is gone. And freedom is gone, and hope is gone, and they are afraid. And he was wrong. Because the message that the empire sends on Good Friday is that love can do nothing, and love does nothing, and love is doing nothing. But then Mary comes to them with the most ridiculous and impossible story. That Pilate could not destroy him, and that Caesar could not destroy him, and that death itself could not destroy him. And then suddenly he was with them, among them, breathing on them and eating with them, and in the midst of their shock and in their confusion, he says to them, love did this. That is a lot to take in. And 40 days is not very long to deal with that, with all of that. But it is the time that they are given. And they have that time with him to see and to know and to understand and to let it soak into their hearts the fullness of what love has done. And then on a Thursday morning, he gathers them together again for breakfast together, one more time. Another walk into the hill country. But this time is different because it's the last time. And he tells them, you are my witnesses. Not just to this moment, not just to this ending, but to everything in his life and death and resurrection that has come before it. He tells them, you are my witnesses. And then because blessing just overflows and pours out of him while he is still blessing them, he is gone. But before he goes, he says, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. That same Holy Spirit that moved in creation, the same Holy Spirit that made her wisdom known through the prophets, the same Holy Spirit that is the power and the energy of God to accomplish God's will, that Holy Spirit, he says, is coming for you. That's next week. That's going to be a good one. But he says, you will be my witnesses. And then these men and women transformed go out into the world. And they can't help but talk about what has transformed them. And so they talk about love and how he loved them, and they talk about love and how he freed them, and they talk about love, and they become fearless. And they talk about love, and those who hear them can't help but find hope in what they are saying. In a time and a place deeply in need of transformation, they rush out into the world filled with the story of the life and the death and the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus of Nazareth. And they say, love did that. Love does that. Love is doing that. And they kept saying it. And we heard it. So here we stand in our own time, in our own place, in a world that is deeply in need of transformation. This world, it needs so much. And I do believe with all my hope that what is broken can be made whole, and that what is corrupted can be redeemed, that what dies can be resurrected, and that love has power to do this. And I do want to know when. When? Because it would be a very good time. And the answer the disciples received doesn't satisfy me any more than it satisfied them. It is not for you to know. Instead, Jesus says, come here. Come close to me. Don't bring me the whole world. Bring me this heart. This little angry piece of you that is holding on to how you have been hurt. This part that is afraid. This part that is so close to despairing. This part that is convinced that it is not enough, that it is not beloved, that it could not be truly forgiven. Bring me that, he says. We'll start there, he says. And we will transform that lonely, fearful, hurting part of you. Beloved, forgiven. And then you will begin to show and to tell. You will talk about love and how he loves you. And you will talk about love and how he fed you, how he freed you. You will talk about love and you will become fearless. And you will talk about love and someone else will find their hope and come with their own broken heart. We will be witnesses to his life and his death and his resurrection and his ascension, witnesses to what love did, what love does, what love is doing, what love will always do. Shake the world to its roots and turn it upside down. It is a ridiculous, impossible story. And this heart, this family, this community, this province, this nation, this world, so much of it is deeply in need of transformation. But love does that. Thanks be to God.